good afternoon and good evening to wherever you are out in the world. We hope you are safe and healthy today. We want to sincerely thank you for spending a little bit of time today to talk about sonic branding with product design. So I'd like to first start off with some introductions. As you'll see on your computer screen, it looks like Audrey and myself are really close to each other. But in fact, we're practicing really good social distancing. I think there's a few states between New York and Michigan. But to help you see us a little bit better, I'm going to stop sharing the presentation and go full screen for a bit with our video. All right, excellent. So I'll start first. My name is Brandon Satanek. I work at Whirlpool Corporation, as you saw. And when you think of Whirlpool Corporation, I want you to think of the appliance company that makes washers and dryers and microwaves. It varies around the world depending on where you're at. We're not the company that makes hot tubs. I'm sure hot tubs make some interesting sounds, but today we're talking about appliances. Likewise, if you think about my role at Whirlpool, I'm a global manager of user experience and user interface design, specifically for our products, for the actual appliances. And a couple years ago, we started a sound project with Audiobrain. So I'm pleased to kick it over to Audrey to introduce herself as well.
Thank you, Brandon. And thank you everybody from around the world joining in this one-of-a-kind event that we are participating in. My name is Audrey Arbeeny. I'm the founder, CEO, executive producer of Audiobrain. I've been doing sonic branding for 25 years, and we work all over the world. Our clients include everyone from Google to Microsoft Xbox 360 to music supervision for NBC Olympics, Holland America Cruise Lines, and of course, Whirlpool and KitchenAid, which we're going to discuss today. So thank you so much for joining us and having us with you.
Audrey will go through a bit of our agenda for today.
Sure. So our agenda, as we plan it right now, we'll see where we go. Our agenda is to discuss the importance of sonic branding, where and when and how it's used. We're going to give you some real life examples, and we're going to give you tips for success. So we hope you take away from today things that you can implement tomorrow to help your brand. So it's really competitive right now. You know, consumers really want these emotive experiences. They want to be engaged on a deeper level, and it's a very, very different game than it used to be. But with that, for brands, there's significant opportunity to fulfill this need.
So when we talk about brands, we talk about Whirlpool, Audrey already mentioned that we have KitchenAid as one of our brands. But in fact, if you go around the world, we have so many more. Maytag, for example, here in the United States. If you're elsewhere in the world, you might be familiar with Bachnet or Brastem. And for us, brands are incredibly important. It's one of the key ways that we reach our customers. And each of these brands has a bit of a unique DNA to them. But one thing we hope is in common across all these brands is that our consumers fall in love with them. And we hope that they fall in love with them not only while they're in the store aisle, but for the years, or the 10 to 15 years that they own our products and have them inside their homes. Now, if you're gonna have a product in your home for that long of a period of time and you wanna fall in love with it, the good question is how do we do that? And we believe it comes through really designing for all 5 senses. And within Whirlpool, obviously you might think of, well, you know, we make these physical products, so the visual appearance must be important. And it definitely is. The way it looks inside your kitchen or laundry room is incredibly important. Even things like the smell of the product is incredibly important. And the feelings that are evoked when you're making that warm batch of cookies. But we also have to think about the sounds as well. And that's really the key topic for today. And what's even more important than just thinking about one of these slices like sounds, although we'll discuss that quite a bit here, is thinking about how all 5 of these items completely come together to form a holistic opinion of a brand. So I want to give you an example of a brand that maybe, you know, needs a little bit of work. And specifically what I'm talking about is Doberman Pinscher. And here I'm going to use Disney Pixar's movie Up and remind you of a particular scene. If you're going to create a brand for the Doberman, you might think of a strong, stately dog. And if you then think of what's the sound that brand would actually make, you know, it might evoke a particular image. And yet what happens when that sound doesn't match the brand? Well, that's what this scene from the movie begins to show.
Oh man, Master will not be pleased. We better tell him someone took the bird, right, Alpha?
No. Soon enough, the bird will be ours yet again. Find the scent, my compadres, and you too shall have much rewardings from Master for the toil factor you wage.
Hey, Alpha, I think there's something wrong with your collar. You must have bumped it.
Yeah, your voice sounds funny.
Beta, Gamma. Mayhaps you desired... Squirrel! Mayhaps you...
Okay, all right, I'll stop there. Squirrels, obviously important. Now, there's an example of the sound being used for a humorous effect. But it's funny because the sound was directly in contradiction to the essence of that dog, of the regalness of that animal. So as we begin to think about product design, we want to make sure we don't run into those humorous situations or even annoying situations and have sounds that are completely complementary. And as a product designer, I think a lot about product sounds. But product sounds is not all there is to sonic branding, right, Audrey? There's much more, correct?
Oh, there's a lot more. And obviously, as a product designer, that's what you would think of. Most people over the years will think of sonic branding as a sound logo, like the NBC chimes or Intel Inside, or a jingle, or an iconic voice, like You've Got Mail. But it's so much more than that. It's every single place that your brand is heard, whether it's a call center, room warming soundtracks, music on hold, video opens and closes. It's every single touch point that the brand is heard and deployed in the same way that a visual or brand identity would be deployed. So actually, what is sonic branding? It's the art and the science, and I stress that because it's creative and it's scientific, that surrounds the strategic development and deployment of a consistent, authentic sound experience of a brand. And what we try to do is we create sound identity systems. We find an audio DNA. We find the essence of what makes a brand, and we create a unified and differentiated communication. So it's not just voice and it's not just sound, but it's voice, sound, sound design, music, vibration. Anything that's being heard is part of sonic branding.
So the question might be asked, why now? Why has it become so important? Well, first, I think it's helpful to go back in history a little bit. When you think of products, for a while there, they weren't making any sounds at all. And then for something like an appliance, for a long period of time, they use very crude buzzers inside of them. Maybe you remember your parents' washer and dryer making some awful sound. Well, at some point, maybe in the 90s or so, electronics became commonplace in products and in appliances. And with those electronics came things like piezo speakers. Let me play an example of that. All right, somewhat harsh, might even say even worse than a buzzer. And yet that's what existed in products for a long period of time, until recently. Recently now we have much more sophisticated electronics that are being embedded, not only in appliances, of course, I'm referring to those, but in your mobile phones, your other consumer electronic products you might have in your households, TVs and vacuum cleaners. And we now have an opportunity to take advantage of a much richer technology platform to play sounds like MP3 quality sounds to really engage the customers. And that's important because customers have a lot of choice now when they go shopping. And they're looking for something that could differentiate a product and make them happier. Would you agree with that, Audrey?
Yes, absolutely. The customer drives the experience now. 5-10 years ago, it was all about the push. It was about advertising, and you sold to the customer. Now you need to draw the customer in. You need to attract them. They are looking for consistent experiences. They're looking for value. They're looking for things that make them feel something. And they can have anything from anywhere in the world. They also have a very big voice on social media. And they can say something spectacular about a brand, and the next thing you know, the brand is through the roof. Or consequently, somebody can have a bad experience, and the next thing you know, it's all over the news. So really the customer is in the driver's seat. But most importantly is this emotional connection. We are in a very digital space right now. We're kind of disconnected. We're always on devices. We're always telecommuting. We're texting, we're emailing, and we rarely do in-person, face-to-face. Most especially now in this COVID time, we realize how much we need that emotional connection. And we realize how much products that give us that emotional connection matter, such as when you can FaceTime with somebody who's in the hospital, who's isolated, and they really need to feel and hear something emotional. And why kids want to hold a book or, listen to vinyl. So those products that fulfill that real emotional connection are really driving the future.
As Audrey mentioned, the emotional aspects of sound are incredibly important. But as we begin to discuss the project we worked on together, I'd also like to talk a little bit about the functional use of sound, because the emotion and the function really go hand in hand in this particular case. And in the case of appliance products, and really many others as well, the functional use of sound happens in a couple different areas. One is to provide reassurance. So a lot of products now have capacitive touch buttons, for example. They lack that tactile physical button that used to exist in the past. So sound can help reinforce that an action has taken place on the product as you begin to interact with it. And that happens everything from an appliance even to the headphones I'm wearing. The other use of sound is often for attention driving events. For example, we want to bring people's attention back to that oven so they look at their food before it particularly burns, or take their clothes out of the washer and get them inside their dryer as fast as possible. Altogether, these two elements form basically a journey that a customer ends up following. And as a user experience designer, we consider every moment inside this journey and try to figure out what the best use of the sound is. From the moment that somebody gets it and unboxes it, powers it on for the first time, through those daily interactions, and to those happy events, like when clothes are ready to come out, or your cookies have finished cooking. Now, I've described that journey a little bit, and that's clearly important. But what's equally important, if not the most important thing, is really to understand the consumer themselves, the people that will be using the products. And for Whirlpool and KitchenAid, they are basically focused on two different customer targets, two different personas, if you will. For Whirlpool, what I'd like you to imagine is the caregiver, a mom, a dad, busy working, busy with household chores, but it's not something they dread. Instead, it's those little acts of kindness that they do every day for their children that bring them incredible joy. And we want to, meet them where they are in that journey of helping take care of their family at every moment. KitchenAid, on the other hand, is targeted towards the maker. Maybe you're familiar with the famous KitchenAid stand mixer and basically all the creativity that it unlocks, either itself or through its attachments. And that's what the maker is after. They're after, that creative spirit, that drive to try new things and explore new ideas. And we want to, build on that passion for them and help them along in that creative experience. So what we'll be doing next is playing you some examples of the sounds for Whirlpool and KitchenAid. Audrey will describe a few of the key elements of these sounds, and then I'll play the samples.
Sure. It was both challenging and very rewarding to be doing two brands simultaneously, and two brands that sound very different from each other. So for Whirlpool, the caregiver, we did a lot of research. We met with many teams within the organization, and there's a certain kindness. There's a certain gentleness, a reassurance that comes along with the Whirlpool brand. So after our iteration of sound, we have harps and we have natural instruments, and they're hand plucked to show the human touch. And we also have ascending aspirational sound. In the case of Whirlpool, and when you hear the first sound, it'll be two-note gesture, which isn't always the case that we do that for the number of syllables in the name of a brand, but sometimes it just fits really well. Here we had the opportunity to do polyphonic sounds and replace the piezo sounds because technology is advanced, and when you hear it, it's so rich and warm and textured as to opposed as opposed to the coldness of the piezo sounds that were in the past. It's non-intrusive and comforting. And everything here is created, it's all about the human touch. We recorded a lot of things that were real sounds that you would experience when you were doing laundry, when you were doing this everyday care. And so you might not hear some in here, such as hands rubbing on pants, but we have a lot more sounds than what you're hearing here. But it was really about this quiet sincerity, and that's what we brought to the Whirlpool brand.
Great, thanks. Let me play 4 examples. Again, Audrey mentioned that this is just but a few of the sounds that were developed. There's dozens more that we could spend the entire day playing if we want to. I also want you to contrast these with that harsh piezo sound you heard earlier. First off is one like the power on welcoming sounds. Another example might be if you're using your appliance with a mobile app. Here's a sound of where we need some attention. A door was left open, perhaps on your refrigerator. We want to make sure people come back and close it. And finally, a happy sound, a happy event. Your clothes have finished washing, your oven is finished with your cooking. And clearly a case for celebration, and we want to have a happier sound in that particular. Anything else to add before I switch to KitchenAid?
Yes, the startup sound is also the sound signature. When we create our brands, we like to create a sound signature. We like to create a foundational brand theme that we could draw from. We could go into that for hours later on, but in this case, that's the sound signature. You could hear that at the end of advertising. You could hear that throughout the world. But that harp, that hand-played harp, it's ascending. It's 2-note gestures that emulates Whirlpool. And it's very, very warm and inviting, and a bit unexpected from, an appliance. So we based everything around that it would be human, everything would be played human, and the rest of the sounds, you can hear the association between them, that they sound like a unified communication.
Audrey, would you like to describe a little bit of the goals behind the KitchenAid sounds?
Sure. KitchenAid is very, very different than Whirlpool in the sense this is a very, active participant in creating something that brings them joy. So they are doers. They like to cook. They like to make things. They like to handcraft. So here, what we did was the sounds that you'll hear, they're more overt. They're more active because the user is an active participant. They're more tactile because they're always using their hands. They're making things, they're cutting things, they're rolling things, and they find great joy in that. So the sounds here are more tactile, more modern. We've got a lot of found sounds here, a lot of skeuomorphism that we evolve into the product sounds. And for those that don't know what that is, that's when you have a sound that actually emulates a real sound. So when someone has an old telephone ring and they create a sound that sounds like an old telephone ring but is a little bit more modernized, that would be skeuomorphism. Here we would have sounds from cutting, sounds from pounding things, rolling things, and we incorporate those elements into these sounds. That's what skeuomorphism is. And so what we did here also is we handcrafted a lot of percussive sounds because we noticed a lot of these sounds, like I said, we're cutting, we're pounding, we're mixing. They were, like I said, overt sounds, but they also have this certain feeling of something's being done. You can feel the movement in the sounds. They're a little bit faster than the Whirlpool sounds were. And they just create a sense of joy of making.
Great. Let me play 4 of those sounds for you. That was the first one, the power on sound. And finally, the cycle has finished sound. Excellent.
And again, the power on sound is the sound signature. The sounds are very joyful. They're enjoyable. They're pleasurable to listen to. They have a certain action to them that something's getting done, and they're very different than the Whirlpool sounds. But both of them are showing you a unified communication, a clear articulation of the brand. It shows the benefits of the brand. It addresses the end user. And for us, they've been very successful. So here's what happens when you create stories or sounds that are so deliberate and done with so much care. This is your brand. This is your voice. And sometimes people will spend millions of dollars on visuals, and then they'll just get somebody with GarageBand or something that they could buy stock sounds and put them in. It's not about that. When you align the right sound with the right experience, really great things can happen. So all of a sudden, we create these sounds, and all of a sudden, people are talking about the washing machine that sounds like a harp. So we get a call from the Atlantic, and they want to do a story about it. And it was a pretty big story. And then that gets picked up by the Times UK, and they carried the story. And then Paul Ross and late show picks it up because he sees it in the UK Times and he really enjoys it. So this is what happens when you create really great product sounds. And there's other ones we've created for other brands. They start to take on a life of their own, and people can, it resonates with them. So it's been very successful on our end, from people showing the appreciation for the sounds. But I think it's also been pretty successful for the brand itself.
Yeah, I'd agree. And especially if you go back to that earlier slide where I talked about the 5 senses. And yes, we're very honored when the products win awards, when people take their time out of their day to go and write reviews of our products on store and shopping websites. But we like to believe that when they're doing these things, they're not focusing just on sounds or just on the way the product functions, that they're looking at the complete and holistic experience that they're having with our products. And really through that holistic experience, all those elements working together in harmony is when we can have truly great and successful results. And speaking of successful results, you might be asking yourself, well, if I want to attempt a project like this, what should I do next? And we'd like to focus on maybe about 6 tips here, just to kind of get you going. The first one of these is true of any situation, really any project, of course, which is building the right cross-functional team. In this case, that diversity is really, really important, because we have people like the brand and the marketing teams who truly understand, the customer and the people who will be using the products. We have engineers that will be understanding exactly how these sounds need to be implemented in the best possible light, and other designers that kind of can help bring the process along. And you also often need, expertise in this space. Audiobrain was a great partner for us in this process to kind of give us that expertise in sound design that we did not have.
Okay, number 2, which is really important to me, and I've decided that at some point I might change this to do your homework, because that's really what it's about. When we work with a brand, we live and breathe that brand. We learn everything about it. We speak to everybody we can. We look at the competitors, both the direct competitors and the mindshare competitors. We look at where the brand is going. We look at what the technical constraints are. We look at what different products are going to be coming out. We look at the deployment systems. We look at where it's, perceived globally. Is it perceived different in other countries? So that's what this is about. Really, really, if you do your homework and you live and breathe the brand, then you're well equipped to articulate that brand.
Third one is near and dear to my heart as a user experience designer, which is, as I've said before, the actual user, the people, is really the heart of everything we're trying to accomplish. And understanding how they use the product is incredibly important, but even some of the unique situations they might find themselves in. For example, if you think about, maybe you're having a party in your house and it's loud, how will a sound cut through that? Or perhaps on the other hand, maybe there's a baby sleeping and we need to be able to quiet the sounds or have the products be muted. So in those situations, it becomes really important to understand what people expect and what really helps them on a day-to-day basis. And the 5th one really kind of builds off the 4th a bit. And it's also for all the engineers out there in the room. If you're going through this iteration process, one of the things you might need to iterate around is actually the constraints of the product or environment itself. In the case of Whirlpool, we make large metal boxes with a little speaker inside. So it's really important to fine tune that sound inside that chamber so that we really reproduce them in the best possible way. But you might have different constraints. For example, if you're delivering the sounds through the internet, there's download speeds and bandwidth issues that you need to be concerned about. In all these areas, we can kind of work together and fine tune the sounds so that they're the best possible in your particular situation.
And finally, number 6 is to develop a strategy for expansion. And I know at Audiobrain, we have a very, very unique skill set. So we do creative, we do branding, we do supervision, we do implementation, high-end implementation, we code, we install on very large systems, we build servers. So it's important for us to understand how the architecture is going to work. We try and lay out a blueprint, if you think of it that way. Sonic branding guidelines, and what they consist of, one part is to make sure that everybody knows what the sound of the brand stands for, what each element represents, where and when and how to use it. We want to make sure that we have guidelines that people can follow so that we're not redundant and someone is doing something in another country when we already have a pool of sound that they could pull from. We also like to plan for new sounds, new features that are coming up. And we like to develop new use cases so that we could model out things that then advance the brand.
And with that brings us to a close. So again, we're hoping that you explore this area on your own as well. We definitely need more delightful sounds in the world. So thank you for listening to us. Special thanks to the Voice Global event for providing this opportunity as well. And we'll be perhaps around a little bit on that event. And certainly you can reach out to us on Twitter and LinkedIn as well.
And thank you very much, everybody around the world, for joining. We hope you learned from this. We hope you learned something from this. And there's something in here that every one of you can implement tomorrow, whether it's a large brand, a small brand, an individual. Sonic branding is for everyone. So we hope that you got something from this, and we hope you got something of value. And if it's one thing, then we'll consider it a success. And we hope you enjoy the entire event that is unfolding now. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Thank you. Take care, everybody.